Mac Power Users, episode 659, Workflows with Alex Cox. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks. I am joined by your pal and mine, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you, Stephen?
David, I'm great. How are you?
I have been thinking about you, my friend, because I know you've been working so hard on the St. Jude thing, and just getting the little peeks behind the scenes that I'm doing. I'm sending you all of my love. I hope you're doing good and going to get some rest here pretty soon, because you've been really working hard.
Yeah, the fundraiser has gone super well. As we record this is the last episode of MPU that comes out in September. So if you haven't given yet, you want to go to stjude.org/relay and you can donate. If you work for a company, they probably match funds, and there's a form on that page you can fill out so the match gets applied to the campaign as well. But it's been absolutely amazing. I mean, the Relay FM audience and even the broader Apple community, we're going to talk about this some today. It's such a great group of people who really care about things that matter. And so every year it's so humbling to see people give. And this year we did this thing where people could fundraise on their own, and there were some different incentives and stuff to do that. You could get like a desk mat and a challenge coin and stuff, and people just really took to it. It was really amazing to see. And I mean, look, we're doing it for the best reason I can think of. So while the hours are long and the work is hard, it is a joy to do it each year.
No, I totally agree. And even though I just have a very small role to play in it, I am very proud of it, and I love it, and it makes me happy, and giving money every year makes me happy. And if you're listening, we'd ask you to consider making a contribution. We are almost to our goal, gang. We would love to hit it. And when this show airs, we're going to be even closer. You could be the one that puts us over the top. Could you imagine that if rather than getting a Starbucks coffee, you put Relay over the top today? Wouldn't that make you feel good?
Be awesome.
Yeah. So we've got links. We're going to put them in the show notes, but it's, what is the main link?
It's stjude.org/relay.
Yeah. And we hit one of the milestones, which involves Stephen and I sharing our bags. And I'm going to be doing that from Indoor Studios, which right now has a guy in it with a nail gun. So hopefully it's done by the time I'm there.
Or we just see what's in his backpack too. I mean,
yeah,
it's probably interesting.
Yeah, I can tell he's a Milwaukee man. I can tell you that because he's got all the Milwaukee gear. But so that'd be kind of fun if I was opening a bag and there's a guy behind me with a nail gun, just like hammering stuff into the wall.
Hey, we got to do what we got to do,
What I'm going to say it right now, whether or not that room is done, because it should be, but it might not be. I am recording that in that room. So we're going to do that. When is that? That's next Thursday, right?
Yeah, it's next Thursday. So I'll put
it's this Thursday as this thing releases. I'm sorry.
It's very confusing. I'll put a link. We'll link to it on the Mac Power Users Twitter, and I'll put it in the show notes and stuff. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, either way, gang, head over to relay.fm, donate to St. Jude. Boy, it's such an honor to be a part of this every year. And we all do goofy stuff every day, but you can really make a difference today with a contribution. All right. And today on More Power Users, we got new phones. It's time to talk phone cases. And we are going to be getting to that. But we haven't introduced our guest yet today. Welcome to the show, Alex Cox.
Hello, boys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And we're so happy to have you back, Alex. It's been a while. I was looking. We have a thread between the three of us from 2018, last time you were on the show. And that's embarrassing. You're such a great guest. How did we do that? I think it's Steven's fault. I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course it is.
Alex does a lot. They started over, actually, you're independent now, right, Alex?
I am indeed. Lots has changed.
Yeah. So tell us what's going on in your life.
Right now, I was about to say technically, but no, officially, I am a completely independent podcaster, and I do some freelance consulting for creating podcasts and believe it or not, some sort of Mac productivity organization stuff, even though compared to this show, like I'm nothing. I'm teaching people like how to use Siri. But I came from, if folks have heard the first episode that I've done, I don't encourage you to listen to it. It's very awkward, much more awkward, hopefully, than I will be on this episode. But for years, I worked at, 7 years, I worked as an events manager, studio manager, and what else did I do? So many things for a company in Chicago called Cards Against Humanity. And then here in Chicago, there was this thing that happened in 2020 where pretty much all events shut down, and like running an in-person podcast studio wasn't really a great thing to do. So now I am totally independent and recording from the corner of my apartment. And I'm sure we'll sort of get into that when we talk about gear, but I wish that I had more interesting things to say about my indie life, but I'm kind of doing the same things I was doing when I had a full-time job. I have a show called Do by Friday and a show on here on Relay called Roboism, about robots, tech isms, and but mostly robots. Show called Two at a Girl with my spouse about queerness, and another show project type thing that if you want to, you can find at patreon.com/Alex Cox. That keeps me in my apartment. So thank you for everybody who has gone to see that project.
Well, one of the things I love about Alex is that they not only have the ability to make a good podcast, to get on microphone and talk, but the production knowledge. I mean, when we did the show, the live show in Chicago, you were right there in the booth, and you were the one that made that show, happen. And I feel like you've got a lot of good knowledge. And so today we're going to talk to you about the stuff you're making, but I also want to talk to you today about how to make stuff, because I know that we have a lot of listeners that are interested. Maybe they want to toy around with podcasting, but even maybe they just want to make a really good recording of an elder relative. And, but it's been a long time since we kind of went down that rabbit hole. The technology's changed. And I'd love to kind of get your feedback on that today.
Absolutely. This is my favorite thing to talk about. And producing events is still one of my favorite things to do, whether it is in person, which is slowly happening again, or if it is a virtual event.
Yeah, it is. It is nice as the world starts to open up a bit. I think we have to talk about that, Stephen. At some point, we have to start thinking about a live show. I don't know when, but we're going to get there.
I feel like it's coming for us.
Yeah, I really miss them. But we're not going to do it in Chicago this time, because I think we've done like 4 of them in Chicago. we gotta go to another place this time. But,
unfortunately, there's not many free theaters left in Chicago. Well, there's not many small theaters in Chicago left in general. But eventually, one day. So it's been a really interesting transition between live tech and tech that is, still technically live, but everyone has become their own producer for a lot of things. And that's kind of been a huge part of my life the past 2 years. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure you've helped a lot of people, though.
That's what kept me employed, really, for 2 years, teaching people how to do their own productions at home.
I believe it. I mean, from as simple as like teaching a Zoom class to, something much fancier. I have a friend who's a cabinet maker, and I was asking him how's business, and he said he is so busy because everybody wants fancy bookcases on one wall in their house now so they can do Zoom meetings,
Oh, that's fantastic.
And that's what he's doing. He's just building built-ins that people can have as a background for their Zoom. I mean, hey, the world changes. But you know what else has changed is Apple. They have stopped putting Intel chips in their computers. Did you know that?
I've heard some rumors about it. Yeah.
So how has that impacted your life? Have you upgraded to an Apple Silicon Mac yet?
Oh my gosh, it's made my life so much better. Like, as I mentioned, doing a lot of remote work, but even when I wasn't doing remote work, trying to use an Intel Mac, and especially an Intel Mac with a laptop that has one of those keyboards that we all loved, the butterfly. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there was this butterfly keyboard that existed, I believe, since 2015. That was like the bane of my existence.
Butterfly. That sounds like a fun thing. It's a
Yeah,
butterfly.
it's not a word that now just puts terror down my spine. It's just woof. But I believe was it March 2020, actually, like when things were shutting down, when Apple announced that there were Silicon Macs coming, Apple Silicon Macs. I was excited, but honestly, more exciting to me was the fact that the butterfly keyboards were being retired.
Yeah.
And also that suddenly I could get Apple Silicon Macs for my entire team, and it just being able to explain things and explain things in a way that it's like, oh, it's not this isn't some weird Windows thing. This isn't like your thing the software that I have chosen to put on your Mac for work, I know will run, and we won't have to deal with any weird stuff, or rather all of the bugs I knew very well, because suddenly everybody was talking about Apple Silicon and that was the focus of everything. So for a while, I still was on a iMac, or I had an iMac Pro until the 14-inch MacBook Pro came out. And that has changed my life so much for the better. It was the first thing I bought when I went indie. Having the forget about the keyboard for a second. Having the HDMI port, having the SD card slot, having the headphone port on the right side, because most headphones, the wire comes out the left side.
Yeah.
There are just so many little things that have made my life so much better that I kind of forget just how powerful this MacBook Pro is. So my 14-inch MacBook Pro is the only Mac I have right now, and the only thing I use, and I'm extremely, extremely happy with it.
Yeah, so the right side for a headphone jack is the left side.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Oh my God.
The correct.
Yeah. Oh God. That was really embarrassing. I mean, not that embarrassing. I've done much more embarrassing things, but
I love that we can just kind of hear that working through, on the other side.
I'm still just scarred from years and years of going on the right. I'm like, just, oh.
It's like, hey, Apple, every headphone manufacturer in the world puts the cord on the left side. Why don't you just go ahead and put the jack there too? But no, I was thinking, for someone who does as much production as you, the MacBook Pro must have really kind of solved a lot of problems. How much do you use HDMI in your work at this point?
I thought that, oh my gosh, now I'm never doing live events, so I'll never use this HDMI port. But surprisingly, I have used it a couple times for in-person events when someone needs to do a keynote or PowerPoint presentation, or there just needs to be projections or something. But just those 3 times I've used it, so much of the stress and anxiety for myself goes away because I don't have to use those dongles. But also normal people who just want to bring in their own or have their own laptop, or just they don't need to think about dongles. They usually bring their dongles, and they're the wrong kinds, which is why I still have a giant bag filled with them. But just for traveling, like going to a hotel room, as I do more of that, just plugging it into my MacBook Pro and not having to, just be like, okay, is the HDMI cable dead, or is it my dongle? Just one less point of failure I have to check is great. And that adds up really quickly.
Yeah, I just had we had a family member visiting recently, and I was in one room of the house, and I heard the because we have these air purifiers, which is I guess another thing that people do these days, and I'm like, the thing, because it has like an automatic sensor in it, and I thought, oh man, that thing just, sometimes it goes too fast, and I'm like, it's too loud, and I went in there, and it was my mother-in-law on her MacBook Air, and I totally forgot that they make noise.
Oh no.
It was like an old one,
Yeah.
and she, can I just go down a rabbit hole here for a minute? Everybody has one member of their family like this. I love my mother-in-law dearly. Anytime something pops up on her screen that says, hey, why don't you click OK and give me your social security number? She does it,
Oof.
So every time she comes to my house, I have to detox her computer. But, but I hadn't done it yet that time. So I don't know what, bots were running in the background. Maybe she was, looking for Bitcoin or something without knowing it. And, but I could hear the thing blowing across the house. I'm like, oh yeah, that Intel computers made that noise. I forgot about that. I'm so spoiled at this point.
Well, it's right there in the name. It's the MacBook Air. You got to
keep
there. So Alex, before you were on an iMac Pro, if I remember correctly, so you just full-time notebook person now?
I am a full-time notebook person, and I totally forgot to mention my studio display because I am a notebook person, but it is in clamshell mode probably 75% of the time. Did I get the name right? I do not have the XDR. I don't have it's a studio display, right? Yes, we call prosumer stuff studio now, according to Apple, I think. But that has become another part of life that's just so much easier. I did not expect to have an Apple monitor ever again, to be honest.
Yeah.
And when the MacBook Pro was announced, I was like, oh, cool. I'm just going to be able to plug in my HDMI monitor directly into it. But no, now I have my entire system is just over one Thunderbolt plug, except for my USB-C, my XLR box, because I've been yelled at too many times to just put that directly into the MacBook Pro. But I think most people my age happen to, or at least people who aren't total nerds, are now MacBook Pros full time, or any sort of notebook full time as their only computer. But because of the pandemic, they're also using monitors like I am. So it seems to be sort of the default way a lot of folks work. And that used to drive me a little bit bonkers. But I've had zero problems with the MacBook Pro. I have had some issues with the studio display that something weird has happened and some audio won't come out. So I need to unplug my monitor and plug it back in. But I can't complain too much about that because it's still so much better than the LG Ultrafine that most nerds had for years, which was as I think Marco Arment coined it, it's the LG fine. It's fine. But unplugging this is still better than restarting my car when CarPlay doesn't work. So, you take what you can get.
Eventually, everything needs to be rebooted. That's the lesson here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. If human brains need to sleep, then I can forgive unplugging and plugging back in my monitor.
That's a healthy way to think about it. But a couple questions on that. Number one is, historically, having a laptop that you just plug into an external display has been a bit of a crapshoot. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I remember I used to have to plug it in, but then lift the lid just enough to get the laptop to engage and then shut the lid. And then it would go to, there's all these little tricks you do over the years. But, the promise with the modern Apple displays is you're supposed to be able to just plug them in no matter what, and they'll always work. Has that been your experience, or how's that working for you?
I've only only had to do it once, and that was when I had Beta Ventura running off of a hard drive.
Sure.
So a lot of things were probably just going wrong in that situation. And even when the old Apple I think it was just called the Thunderbolts display. I apologize if I'm getting that wrong,
I
Stephen.
think that's right. I think that's what they call it.
That I still had to open and close my MacBook Pro at the time. In fact, I had a friend 3D print me a little hinge for my old 13-inch MacBook Pro because I had to open and do that little tiny wedge thing all the time. But if you have your MacBook in some sort of dock, or for me, I think it was, I just have one of those things that you slide the MacBook in so that it is like it's you need to open it kind of like a book. I think we're in the same boat, but. And in the past, I used to have to do that all the time with my little sad plastic hinge off of my little weird dock I had for the MacBook Pro. But in this case, I've only had to do it one time, which if I had to do it every single day, I would be okay with it because I also have I have a Magic Keyboard with a Touch ID. So it's just so much better.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. It is the 1Password application that both Stephen and I use to protect ourselves and our families online. 1Password brings so many tools to bear on protecting you. First, it allows you to create strong and unique passwords for every website or service that you sign up for, and then it manages it all that for you. So all you have to remember is your 1Password, and that's why they have the name. But the thing about 1Password is it's in a company where every person that works there is dedicated to protecting its customers' privacy, and they do so many cool features on that regard. For instance, one of the things they do is they track websites that get hacked, and they'll compare that to the list of passwords you have. So it'll tell you when you open the app, you're saying, hey, you're using this website. Well, guess what? They got hacked. You should probably change your password there. And it does that for you because I don't want to keep track of all that stuff. They also are constantly writing cool blog posts and entries to help you protect your privacy. Most recently, they wrote a post about doxing. And doxing is that hacker thing where they identify somebody and they put your name out there into the public when you don't want it out there. But it also talks about social engineering and ways that you can be vulnerable without realizing it. And not only do we need to protect ourselves, a lot of times people that listen to Mac Power Users need to protect their family as well, especially elderly relatives that are so subject to these types of social engineering hacks. So I would recommend reading this article. I'll put a link in the show notes for it. And it gives you some great advice on how to protect yourself and others. But that's just what 1Password does. I mean, when you sign up for their service, you're getting that whole team at your back at all times. They always keep on top of all the risks to your privacy. And I just am so happy as a customer. I just paid my renewal. I have the family plan. You can get that too. Just go to 1password.com/MPU in all caps. I used all caps this time. I got my own discount. Isn't that cool? So just 1password.com/MPU in all caps. You get a nice 20% discount on that family plan. Protect everybody in your family. So go check it out. 1password.com/MPU in all caps and sign up today. Alex, one question a lot of people have when you're running just off your laptop is storage. Like, how do you deal with like large amounts of storage, backups, things like that? I know you have a lot of media files. I mean, that's your job. And, the laptops don't have the amounts of storage you historically get in a desktop machine. How are you getting around that?
Well, this time I got around it by spending way too much money to have 4 terabytes on my laptop.
Yeah.
But what I used to do was have just use various types of NASes And now I actually just got a Synology. So I do have 4 terabytes to keep pretty much everything that I will need on a daily basis, which includes like larger media files and sound effects and like just footage that I put in a lot of projects often. But to archive footage, I have started sending things off into my Synology, and I can still access that from wherever. And I really have been sort of Synology brained by Casey Liss, I think, because it's definitely not for everybody. Usually I just set folks up with a time machine and have them back everything up to along with backing stuff up, if they are using their MacBooks or MacBook Pros as their main device, I'll just be like, okay, here is a whatever is the fastest drive, external drive that you can afford. Plug this in and just treat it as external storage. And then if it is one of my relatives, I will install Backblaze on it, just like I have, so that they don't even know that their computer is totally backed up. Because I like to pretend that I don't have Backblaze, and that eventually, if I have to use it, that's fine. And I'm pretty sure that I'm costing Backblaze money at this point, because it has, my entire Dropbox backed up and all of that stuff. So I do think if you are getting a laptop, you should still spend as much, if you have a budget, throw as much into RAM as you can, but right after that is get as much storage as possible, because
it's not like the old days. You can't add storage later. You gotta. And I think for all of us nerds, like if we're using Backblaze, if we're actually getting data off Backblaze, something went wrong.
Right.
I mean, we love having it, but we really hope we never need it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a normie, really, because people who work with video, a lot of video files, both of you know this now. I know that you have more complicated workflows, but a lot of people who are working on big projects and using Adobe Premiere and stuff, it's kind of common practice to keep it on an external NAS that everyone can can get all of that footage on and off. I was almost going to say easily, but that's just a dream and something we like to tell ourselves. It's a nightmare almost every time. But most people don't need as much storage as I do now that I'm only or mostly working with my own stuff.
All right. So what about the other things, shiny things Apple makes? Are you an iPad user at this point?
I used my iPad as sort of my primary computer for all of the laptop or all of the butterfly keyboard years, because it was just so unreliable. And you know what? Having a dongle with an HDMI port that you could take to a theater if you were doing a live show, whether that be an improv show or a podcast or whatever, it was more reliable than the USB-C dongles in a MacBook, which really sucked. But at the time, I think a lot of folks felt like the Mac was really just slow, like not dying, but it just wasn't supposed to be for normal use. And unless there was a way that I could, you noted that if I was in my own theater or my company's theater, I could be in a booth like wired up. But I just did not trust plugging a Mac into other people's stuff because it rarely worked. And iPad always worked. And then the M1 came out, and it was just so tempting that I was like, all right, clearly Apple cares about the Mac again. So I actually sold off my iPad Pros, and right now I have an iPad mini that I adore. That's just like my reading device. But
So good.
other than that, I don't really use an iPad anymore. Not even because there are a lot of issues that you folks have talked about with the iPad software and the iPad betas, especially. But because Shortcuts is on the Mac, pretty much everything that I wanted or I could do with my iPad and I wanted to do on my Mac, now I can. So, but the thing that's sort of weird about me and people give me a lot of looks for is usually using my iPhone as my main, not my main, but my primary computer, I guess. I get a new iPhone every year. It's my favorite vice to spend $1,000 on something that we all say that we don't need, but I think honestly, year over year, it does make my work better and faster. And the reason I call it like my primary computer is because for years it was the only thing that I could rely on for reception, having a keyboard that worked, because even though it was a software keyboard, which is so sad. And really, now I can access everything. I might not be able to do everything I want. Like, I can't manipulate footage and can't do a lot of automations that I want, but it's still the most reliable computer I have. So when I'm out and about, I do a lot of writing and stuff in cafes. Like I've always been that person, but now I'm that person with a little iPhone stand and a foldable keyboard. Or if I'm really being a nerd, my full-on Magic keyboard. But that's kind of where I've been at because I don't have an iPad and because I am more hesitant to take my MacBook places because it's pretty heavy, and also it doesn't have it has Apple Care, but I also have the confidence that anywhere in the world, if I smash my iPhone, I can get it up and running as quickly as I need it. Whereas a Mac, not so much. Does that make any sort of sense? I know that's like absolutely wild, but I do. I trust my phone more than my laptop, even though Apple Silicon is just fantastic.
I mean, I think that's true for a lot of people whose phone is their primary computer or only computer in a lot of places. I mean, I know for me, and other than recording and editing, other than like doing the actual podcasts themselves, like I can run my business from my phone. And there are definitely seasons or times where that is exactly how I do it, right? If I'm traveling or just away from the office, I can do so much with the phone. Now, I have not gone to the lengths of a little iPhone stand and a foldable keyboard, but to your point, the iPhone's pretty ubiquitous. And if something were to happen, you can replace it. I would say, I'm kind of like ranking things in my mind. iPhone with a Bluetooth keyboard is definitely better than taking an iMac or like a desktop PC to a coffee shop. Like those pictures float around every few years. So you're ahead of those people.
Another thing that is really important is I think it's the one thing that sort of keeps me in touch with reality when it comes to what normal tech consumers are doing / using, because a lot of and I don't do much consulting anymore, but so many folks are like, well, I have my work computer, but I don't need to touch that. I just have my iPhone. And that's why I'm so glad Shortcuts is on the Mac. But Shortcuts is the app Shortcuts, and Shortcuts, the lowercase things, are becoming people are actually discovering them and using them. So it's also a way to just kind of remind myself when I'm trying to explain a technical issue to somebody, like knowing what their tech vocabulary is, sort of, because I mean, like I just said, shortcuts, Macs and Macs, all of the weird names Apple have, it makes things less accessible. So also just using a phone constantly for most of my work, it helps me do tech support as well, even though I don't do it as much.
I totally understand your hesitancy to take your MacBook Pro all around the world with you. You already said you got the high memory. I'm sure you got a good build, and that's like your precious now. It's like your iMac Pro of yesteryear. And I went through the same thing because I have a MacBook Pro that is really well spec'd, and I get nervous every time I take it out. My solution was to buy a MacBook Air, but that wasn't probably as wise as what you're doing, just using your phone. But I do think that there's something to that, and your laptop is in essence your production machine, and you think of it differently when that happens.
I will say, when Steven wrote that love letter to the M2 MacBook Air, it was so, so tempting to get that. Just, that cute little guy. And my head prevailed, and I just have one Mac. But that MacBook Air is gorgeous and so fast. It is really close that it could be my main production machine, but not quite there yet.
Alex, what in your mind, where do you say this is an iPhone thing versus this is a Mac thing? What are kind of the general categories in your head?
Media production and manipulation, and which it includes podcast recording, obviously. Although I have done some quick and dirty edits from my iPhone. I would never admit that I edited an episode of my, I guess, main podcast, Due by Friday with Merlin Mann on my iPhone. But, sometimes you're in an airport and things happen. And then you're using Ferrite to edit 4 hours of audio on your phone. So the Mac, almost everything is maybe not easier, but faster. But sometimes the iPhone is just more delightful. Like, I have been enjoying actually listening to and taking notes on podcasts I'm editing, or rather like listening to and taking editing notes and not actually editing it from Overcast, because the new dynamic island on the iPhone 14 Pro just is so delightful every time I use it. It's not practical, but it's fun. And that's how I got how and why I love Apple. So, if you have the time, why not?
One other question for you. The idea of using your phone in like a coffee shop with a foldable keyboard, that, because I just went back up to the Mac size on it, and when you said it, I'm like, I could probably do that again. What are your favorite apps what do you use the keyboard for when you're sitting there and propping up your phone somewhere and using it with a proper, foldable Bluetooth keyboard?
My main app pretty much everywhere, and it's almost an OS at this point for me, is Drafts by the brilliant Agile Tortoise, Greg Turtle, as I
Greg
call
Pierce,
him sometimes.
Yeah.
And I do use Obsidian, but Obsidian's getting better on mobile almost every day, it seems. But right now, Drafts has like almost all the shortcuts you would use on the Mac, and especially on the iPad, are just there on iOS. And the other thing really is Siri. I talk to my phone a whole lot. I'm trying to think of what else. It's kind of like keyboard shortcuts. Like, there's so much I do that it's really hard to. That's why I keep almost everything in Markdown, is because I have just terrible memory, and I keep everything in Obsidian and Drafts so that I can find it quickly and easily through wherever I am. And usually the biggest problem I run into isn't the iOS software, but sometimes the keyboard is just really bad. So I'm constantly kind of on the hunt for a foldable keyboard that is reliable, but it's also why I travel with a Magic Keyboard as well. Sometimes I plug it into my iPhone if it isn't charged. I get a lot of weird looks. It's not that weird. It's a keyboard in an iPhone. But I think that's also why also being able to pull up Spotlight from a keyboard on your iPhone is just so so cool. It feels like running, like I feel like a kid running Quicksilver again from a iMac DV in like 2005. It's great.
Yeah, I will second the nomination for drafts there because I love Obsidian too, but I almost never open up my phone because it's just an app that works way better on the Mac, just the way it's made, whereas drafts is like a beast on the phone. And in terms of keyboards, I would recommend iClever. They've got several. I bought one. I just looked at my Amazon history. I bought it in 2019. The one I have, they don't even make anymore, but it's in two pieces and it folds as opposed to three. Some of them fold up into three. This one folds up into two, but it's small enough that it fits in almost any bag. And I've been using it with an iPad mini, but I want to do some experiments now with the phone and see where that goes. But yeah, they're out there and they're not that expensive. That's a nice thing. Like you can try some of these. This is something I would recommend trying off Amazon with a company that has a return policy. Get it, try it for a few days, and you'll know very quickly if it works for you or not. Send it back if it doesn't.
That's what I've been doing recently with USB-C foldable keyboards because I had iClever is great. The main one I'm using right now is a Samsur's portable rechargeable wireless keyboard with stand holder, which is kind of has a weird little hinge that puts it's a little bit more ergonomic. But
Okay.
Right now, there's only a micro USB version, which is such a pain.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
the last thing. Oh,
Yeah, mine does too. I've got a couple things in my life that are still micro, but I just have like one spot in the house. And the nice thing with these foldable keyboards is like you could charge it and then go on vacation and then come back and you're fine. You don't even need to bring a charging cable. I guess depending on how long your vacation, for a week, you could have it for a week and not have a problem.
which used to be the case for me, except I do you. It's about 3 days for me, and I actually have an automation to for every 3 days a reminder to charge my keyboard, and when that reminder is completed, it just opens Obsidian because then at least I have 3 days of Obsidian work where all of my images and my vault is synced up and whatnot. So again, it's pretty slow, but if I need it, at least it's there.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by TextExpander. Go to textexpander.com/MPU to get 20% off your first year. One thing we love at the Mac Power Users is TextExpander. That's because it's the tool that helps you get started with automation right away. If there's anything you type on your computer more than once, you need TextExpander. With TextExpander, you can stop wasting time on repetitive work and make your Mac do the work for you. TextExpander saves you time by activating the things you type regularly with just a few clicks. Both Stephen and I have been using TextExpander for more than a decade. It's just an amazing tool that goes so much farther than any other text replacement tool. With TextExpander, you can have it fill in things like your address and phone number, but you can also have it create emails for you, form letters, customer support requests, whatever it is that you type regularly, you can automate it with TextExpander. Back when I was in the law racket, I used it to fill in contract terms. These days, I use it a lot for customer support requests. TextExpander gives you the ability to insert things like the date and time or hard-coded keys like the tab key or the return key. It's just so powerful. Also with TextExpander, you can do automation. You can put AppleScript or JavaScript automation right in your TextExpander snippet. There's just no other app that does this kind of thing, and it's super powerful. I always call it the starting point for automation because it's so good to get you started with automating. If you've been interested in making your computer work harder for you so you don't have to, TextExpander is a great way to get started. Just collect anything you type more than once, add it to a TextExpander snippet, and you're off to the races. And then as you learn how to use the application, you can go deeper. Like one of the things I do is emails, where I type in a snippet in the subject line. TextExpander automatically fills in that subject line, then hits the tab key, then uses an AppleScript to grab the name of the recipient, puts that in there, and then types my text for me. It's super powerful and super fast. And that's not all you can do with Text Expander, because they also support Teams. With Text Expander, you can get your team communicating faster so they can focus on what's the most important. The way it works is you set up a Text Expander database of common snippets that your whole team can access. That gets information out of silos and into the hands of everyone that needs to use it. And when you need to make changes, you can make it in the Text Expander cloud, and it automatically populates to everybody else that's on the team. It's really that easy. And Text Expander is available on the Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad. And best of all, if you're a listener, you get 20% off your first year. Text Expander was the original sponsor of the Mac Power Users, and we will always be appreciative of them for that. If you want to learn more, go to textexpander.com/MPU. Once again, textexpander.com/MPU to get that 20% off your first year and learn more. Thank you, Text Expander, for all of your support of the Mac Power Users.
Alex, we've talked a little bit about what you're doing as an independent now, and I'm curious to talk about the tools and apps that you're using to manage that. Let's start with communication. I mean, even though you are indie, you work with a lot of people on a lot of different projects. How do you go about organizing that information, keeping people on track, etc.?
I mean, nothing too wild or original at this point. I wouldn't say I'm flailing, but I'm still getting sort of used to indie life since it's I've been truly independent since I think the beginning of June. Because when you are the IT person for your company, like just and that company itself is independent, sort of uncoupling all of your business stuff and your personal stuff takes like a month. It was absolutely wild. But right now, my main tools, like most people, are Slack and increasingly Discord, which I feel kind of weird about. I did not have to, but I finally acquiesced and I'm using Todoist instead of OmniFocus for the first time in a while, which OmniFocus used to like totally run my life. And I'm pretty sure when the new version of OmniFocus comes out, I'll switch back because I really, really like it. But I've gotten much more into collaborative tasks and the Kanban or the card view, I think they technically call it in Obsidian, Todoist has been very helpful for long-term projects that have been starting up. But a lot of what I do is fast-paced, quick conversations before or after a recording or a meeting or something. But so that's like the main communication tools are really Slack and Discord, and less email, which is awesome. It makes me so happy. I do inbox zero, which Merlin Man totally endorses me emptying my inbox every day. Then the sort of keeping things on track for myself has, even when I was at my jobby job, was using Toggle, the time tracking. I guess it's I never really used the app. I used its API with various apps, and now especially Timery. And I almost never open the app actually because I use things like Bunch by Brett Terpstra, and or built-in shortcuts on iOS that when I am doing something like recording a podcast, editing a podcast, or even just doing research, a timer will start. And then about every week I check to make sure I look at my Timery stats to see if I'm kind of on track, or I see, oh, wow, there's a big chunk of time that I did that is unaccounted for. I try to go back and like look at my calendar and see what or if I was doing anything. And it's kind of been it was illuminating actually, even before I left my job, just seeing how often I was wrong about how long something would take me, and I sort of reversed the rule of I always assume something is going to take me much longer than I think it will. And now I think it will. I actually have become faster at some things, and then I'm like, ooh, free time, hooray! And I've got more time to tinker, but that also leads to like procrastination. So I'm kind of trying to get a hold on, okay, because I'm not being interrupted with my job stuff on after hours, like I have mostly full control of my schedule. How much time do things like, how much time do I actually need to devote to something? So I guess really, once again, time tracking has been the main thing that has kept me sane, really. Like it's the one thing that like really keeps me in touch with reality, because hopefully I think a lot of us get into that flow. And especially with, I do use a really basic Pomodoro timer that literally looks like a tomato. So I do I don't do it exactly, but I work for 30 minutes, then take 5 minutes off. And then when I get tired, I take a 20-minute break. Which is very boring, but another pandemic thing was like learning to listen to my body, and like having a good chair has become the most important thing for me with indie life. It's great. Being 32 is also awesome, but I'm totally prepared for my body to break down at any moment. So part of my productivity now is making sure I take care of my body. Another shortcuts thing is making sure I am hydrated. I don't know, like I'm trying to, like I said, I hope that I am not flailing, but I'm sort of still treading the indie waters. And I have been lucky enough I was lucky enough to do a lot of my own projects when I still had a job without them owning any, like any of the IP, any of the creative stuff. So I am just still, I know, David, you've kind of gone through that where you were a full-time lawyer and then a sort of kind of sometimes a lawyer, and now you're just a big Mac boy. So I'm trying to figure out like what am I just fully going to be the big pod boy, or am I going to do more streaming stuff or do more writing stuff? And time tracking and communication with other indie folks is how I'm sort of figuring all of that out.
Well, I think that you time tracking is one of the smartest things you can do. And it's like magic, because so often we work in this negative feedback loop where we wake up, we're like, well, I'm going to do these 15 things today, and each one of them is only going to take 10 minutes. But we don't really hold ourselves accountable. But when you time track, you actually at the end of the day say, oh, that thing I thought was going to take 15 minutes took 3 hours. And then suddenly the next time you do that thing, you don't say it's going to take 15 minutes. You'll probably, because we're human, you'll say, well, I can do it in an hour and a half. You'll eventually get yourself up to the 3 hours that it actually takes. But once you get there with using the feedback loop of time tracking, you will get there. And you wake up in the morning and say, well, I'm going to do 3 things today, and they're going to be done right, and they're going to take the amount of time that they normally take to do, and I'm going to finish the day feeling great. Because when you say you're going to do 15 things, you're lucky if you do 1. But if you say you're going to do 3 things, you may actually do 3 things. And it's just a wonderful technique that it seems unintuitive. And I hear from this all the time because I talk about it on the Focus podcast. People write me, they're like, I don't have time to write down my time, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? Because you don't have time is why you need to do it. And you really do. It's like a investment. It's like putting, a nickel in and getting $10 back. It's so worth it. But you don't know that until you experience it. And it's very hard to like force yourself to try it, because it seems intuitively that it's just a waste, but it's not.
I really like what I think Brett Terpstra has said about automation, where sure, if you put 3 hours into it and over the next 3 years, if you get that 3 hours back, it's probably worth it. But more importantly, for me, when I automate something, it's almost like making a checklist of what I need to do. So even if that automation breaks sometime, sometime down the line, I can see like, okay, what did this automation do so that I know how to fix it that still makes my life easier and I'm not missing a step.
It's hard, but I mean, to kind of go down that rabbit hole, I also think that when you make the automation, then it makes sure that you do it right going forward. Like a
Totally.
couple, like 6 months ago, I rewrote all my automations for podcast planning. And like now I get the right things in the right lists in the right places. And it's easy for me to see what's on deck and everything. Whereas before I felt like I was starting to get in a spot where I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And, taking the time sometimes helps. And then in the case of someone like Brett Terpstra, he does something amazing. And he saves himself some time, but he saves the world globally time because he puts it out there, and then it really it's exponential.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm really impressed with, Alex, listening to you today is just how much you're saying the word shortcuts and bringing automation. Is shortcuts kind of your automation platform of choice at this point?
Definitely. And part of that is the sort of staying in touch with how normal people are using their tech and slowly being able to bring them in using simple shortcuts like, hey, this is gonna look it it's suggesting you can put it on your calendar. Isn't that great? Along with Apple straight up saying shortcuts is the future of automation.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, and I was like, oh, thank God. Like, I know some people did not like hearing that, but at least it was said, and at least it's out in the open. It's like when I feel like it was when you are watching a couple and they are, that they're going to get divorced or break up, but they just don't say it. And everyone's holding their breath. And it's like, yep, we're not going to do Automator. Apple script it's not going anywhere, but we're like, hey kids, we still love you. It's not your fault, but we're going to go with shortcuts. Mm-hmm. And Automator's moving out.
I think in the case of Apple script, it's like, hey kids, it'd be a lot of work to get rid of you, so we're going to keep you around.
We're going to keep you here until you're 18.
Let me add on that point, though. I have heard from Apple people, there is a bunch of the back end at Apple that's running an Apple script. If they got rid of Apple script, I think the whole company would break down.
That's what I'm sort of loving about shortcuts is I've been able to learn and understand a lot of the things I was not able to with Automators or Apple script because I was very much an Automator, but really I use the power of like friendimation rather than automation because my like key secret was just glomming on to smart people and befriending folks like Brett and Jay Miller and Merlin, and it's like, please help me, please Jason Snell, help me, my automation for podcasting, it's very sick, please show me how to use the new Audio Hijack. And it just becomes better all around because someone like me who I barely write scripts, but when I do, at least now I kind of know what I'm doing. Whereas before I knew just enough to be dangerous and then would break everything and beg a friend's help. Whereas now it's like, okay, I messed up a magic variable and I know how I can fix this. And now I know how to make better and newer automations with shortcuts. And when WWDC comes around and things change, like I feel like I've been able to grow and learn with shortcuts, whereas that was really difficult for me when, there was scripting languages that have existed since before I was born.
I have a soapbox on shortcuts, and that's that people who listen to this stuff really should try, and they should try to make little tiny shortcuts. That's all you need to do to start. I think too often people that want to learn this stuff say, well, I'm going to make a shortcut that's going to, do something on the level of Federico. Well, Federico is the world's greatest shortcuts builder, right? So you shouldn't start there. Start with one that just like when I take a picture of my dog, it messages it to my, spouse. And
Mm-hmm.
anybody could make that shortcut. And then like once you build it, then it gives you the confidence to make one a little more complicated. And then before you know it, you're making really useful shortcuts. I can tell you, as someone, I've written books on shortcuts, made video courses on it. The ones that I use are not my most complicated ones. The ones that I use the most
Mm-hmm.
often are usually 10 steps or less.
I really think the shortcuts team have taken the attitude of like, okay, if we build it, they will come. When it comes to not just like normal people, but apps like Better Touch Tool and Keyboard Maestro
Yeah.
and Audio Hijack, because then you can still do some really complicated, amazing things. But I don't need. There are some things that I still don't need to / have to build, which is exciting that it's really accessible to a way larger group of people.
And what's cool with a lot of these tools is that you can crack open the automation and see what it's doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
With some of the like older stuff, like with AppleScript or even like shell scripting, some of that, like you can kind of work it out, but it's hard to follow the flow, at least for me. And in shortcuts, like, okay, well, things are going to run top to bottom, basically, in this workflow, and you can see each step individually and see how it's working. I mean, there's tons of times when I'm looking to solve a problem. You can go find a shortcut that's similar and look how that one is built and kind of work out where you need to go. And that's a really cool thing.
Yes.
It's making it much more accessible to people who are just learning.
And I think that other apps are sort of either learning that or finding it easier to implement, is especially Alfred, which is not just my favorite app launcher, but one of my favorite Mac apps. Like I think in Alfred 5 they call it workflows now, and just being able to build automations with those little blocks. And it's not that I always need or want I almost called it WYSIWYG, like a visual editor. It's just a great way to get started. And Alfred is like, the team at Alfred, I remember talking to them and they were like, people seem to really take to this shortcuts way of thinking. So let's try to do this. And, Stephen, like you said, like if there's this one part I don't understand, like I'm still learning regular expressions, it's, where to go to fix something, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. And, we've got this whole, on the Mac right now, we are entering a golden age of automation. I'm convinced for a couple reasons. I mean, first, like you say, shortcuts is here on the Mac, and a bunch of app developers who historically didn't really do a lot for automation now have a very easy mechanism they can plug into. So, and especially as Ventura releases, because Apple has made shortcuts even easier to create for your apps, and that's something we'll see with Ventura. So it's like users of shortcuts are going to get like new toys every time they open the toolbox. Every time you open it, there's something new in there because some app you already own has added shortcut support. But then the historical kind of more consumer-friendly automations, Hazel, Keyboard Maestro, they have also now got hooks in. So you can use the best of Hazel with the best of Keyboard Maestro with the best of shortcuts. And it's really not that hard to glue them all together. And I feel like people who want to like go down that rabbit hole are going to turn into wizards with their Macs because, putting those three tools together gives you so much, just so many options.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Did I just go down the automation rabbit hole? I'm sorry. I just opened my eyes and realized what did I just do?
Oh, it happens. It definitely happens.
Okay, I'll get off the soapbox.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by Indeed. When it comes to hiring, you need to trust your gut. What if you could give your gut some help? When you want to find top talent fast, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply than candidates who only see it in search, according to US Indeed data. And if you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows that 80% of employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. It really is incredible. Join Indeed now to see why 3 million businesses worldwide are using it to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. So go to Indeed.com/MPU to start hiring now. That's INDEED.com/MPU. That's Indeed.com/MPU. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing is not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Our thanks to Indeed for their support of the show and Relay FM.
All right, guys, we all got new iPhones. It's time to talk about iPhone 14 impressions. Alex, I know you get a new one every year.
You
told us. What'd you get?
I got the iPhone 14 Pro, the regular reasonable size, because I have gigantic hands, but they're wide, not long. So I can barely reach the top of my iPhone as it is. And that's my soapbox, and I shall get down off of it. But the Apple finally did it. I know it's a bit contentious, but there's a Pro phone in purple now, and it might not be the best purple, but it's a purple. And when I look at my purple phone, it makes me happy. But that's not that important.
Oh, wait, I have a question there, though, because I just talked to Rosemary Orchard yesterday, and she says, well, sometimes it looks a little gray. I mean, is it purple enough for you?
That's the thing. I've really loved the white iPhones since the iPhone 11, I believe. Yes. And that, I mean, or I believe the iPhone 12. That's when I think the white really started to pop, and it's just gotten better every year. Just the silver accents are very, very pretty. But seeing that amazing the lavender on the regular iPhone, I was like, dang. And the thing with this purple iPhone is, sure, sometimes it looks a little gray, but it's better than the weird poop color that all of the black or slate or space gray or whatever the iPhone Pros have, those have been. I think the worst was the maybe it was the iPhone 11. I forget. It was like brown, and even Jason Sell, who's colorblind, was like, "Yeah, this is not good." So I am like, okay, it's not the best purple, but it's a Pro phone. We take what we can get. The tiniest bit of whimsy, I will just eat it up.
Yeah, I know it's funny because I think I talk about this too much on the show, but I think Apple is so dropping the ball with colors because like. They put out a gray purple and everybody's losing their mind over it.
Yeah.
Imagine if they'd put out like a regular purple and an orange one and a red one. And like, just like, what if they had really just like embraced the colors like they did with the iMac last year? I mean, I just feel like.
Exactly. Oh, gosh.
It's like we're all like thankful. It's like, well, it's pretty gray. But we still love it,
Yeah.
Please.
It feels a little bit like the U.S. COVID response of like, okay, it's pretty bad, but just please give me a vaccine. Yes, I know that things are really bad, but yes, sure, I will take what I can get. Healthcare for free? Yes, please, God. Donate to St. Jude, everybody. They provide services for free. And I know folks at Apple listen to a lot of feedback from all of you professional Apple nerds, and I hope they're slowly being like, okay, people will spend money on the colors. People like them. Sure, maybe there will be an Apple color czar at some point.
Yeah.
I wonder if I don't like being the person who's like, I wonder if Steve was there or but yeah. I colors have gotten better since Mr. Ive have left the company, so who knows? We're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to put a specific person on it because I think it's a pretty big company. But I like in my Mac Sparky Labs, one of the members' wives insisted on getting the iPhone Pro this year. She's never had it before, but they had a purple one, so she wanted it. And it just seems to me like such a no-brainer. But, I'd love to hear an explanation from Apple why they're so muted with the Pro phones, but and all their Pro stuff. It just seems like, I mean, you could still make a black and gray and white one.
Sure.
But, I mean, they used to make like 10 different color iPods, which sold at much lower volumes, and they were able to manage that. I just feel like, come on, man. But anyway, enough on colors. I want to talk about eSIM. I was worried about it.
Oh, boy.
It turned out to be no problem for me. My phone said, hey, I see that, because I put my old phone next to it and it was doing that pairing thing. It says, the new phone said, I don't have a slot, but I have an eSIM. Is it okay if I grab your phone number from your old phone? I said, sure. And then 2 minutes later, it was working. And I thought that was going to be way more difficult. But how was your experience with that, Stephen and Alex?
Yeah, mine was smooth. I did the direct transfer, so not even an iCloud backup or any store. And basically just one of those steps in the beginning was like exactly what you said. Hey, you need to move to an eSIM. Do you want to do it? And it was really easy. It took a couple of minutes on my end, but it went through and I've had absolutely no problems since. I do find it a little funny. Some of the teardowns are up for people taking apart these phones, and the US phones just have basically an empty space where the SIM tray used to be because they are still shipping physical SIM cards in phones around the world. Just US phones are eSIM only, so they don't want to make, I guess, two different hardware designs.
You know what they should have done with that? What they should have done is they should have put a headphone jack in there, but not put a port. Just put it in there. No, just put it inside the phone where the eSIM would be, but not put the hole in the side. So
just
when the teardowns, just to say, we could have if we wanted.
Yeah. Then people are like buying custom drill bits to access the headphone port. But mine went well. The direct transfer, I've done it several years in a row now, and it takes a long time. I mean, I set mine up to run overnight, and I think last time I looked at my phone before going to sleep, it was like, I have 4 hours left, and I assume it took all 4 hours, but it was really seamless, and all of your stuff basically is there. I haven't really found anything major that I have to log back into other than the YouTube app, but that's not a big deal. Slack and Discord and iMessage, everything just kind of comes right over. And to me, it's the most seamless way to move between phones. I mean, it's not the fastest, but it's definitely the most thorough. And mine has been a pretty smooth migration this time.
How about you, Alex?
Okay. So I think I should say, much like with the purple phone, I'm an outlier because my two favorite colors are gray and purple, so it's a perfect mix for me. I also might be one of the last people on the original iPhone Unlimited data plan from AT&T. So I cannot pair my my phone cannot be a hotspot. It basically it does not have it has like the AT&T fake 5G, but they will have to pry this data plan from my cold dead hands, or so I thought, because I was like, oh no, I'm always able to just swap the physical SIM, and I have not been in an AT&T store in decades because they always want me to upgrade a plan. And I'm like, no, I'm going to pay my $30 a month for this plan until I die. But so I was like, okay, yes, transfer eSIM, sure, okay, all right. And I was like, is this the time? And it took 30 minutes. But now it seems to work all right. But I have no idea what I would do if I had to transfer. I'm very worried about what's going to happen next year, and I think eSIMs are great. They're secure. It's absolutely the way to go. But I have a feeling I'm going to start paying $60 for a phone plan in a year or two, and it doesn't make me happy. And if, God forbid, I ever need to use an Android phone, I don't really know how that's going to work out. But I will say, honestly, I've been playing with eSIMs, and I don't know why I'm complaining about paying too much for a phone plan, because now I do have I have currently a British phone number, and it's just lives in my phone digitally. So I've been switching between my eSIMs, and it's been pretty cool, except for iMessage. iMessage has kind of broken, and people are like, who the heck is this? Because my I don't know, an Apple ID, it seems like, works great with multiple emails, but not so much with multiple phone numbers. So I think that'll get better, but iMessage has always kind of been weird for me. I think everyone has like one iCloud thing that's always been weird for them for some reason. So that is my burden to bear.
Well, I mean, they probably have a board somewhere up at AT&T and says Alex Cox is, and it has one of those like signs that's still on the old plan.
I'm on the most wanted list for cell phone carriers.
Last one. Yeah, in fact, maybe that's what happened when Apple called them. So we're going to eSIM. They're like, finally, we can get Alex Cox off that plan.
We got him. That's, oh, yeah.
What about the cameras? You guys dig into new cameras?
Yeah, I haven't had a ton of time to play with it yet, but just shooting around the house, it does seem way better in low light. The ultra wide looks way better than it did. I have not played any with the Pro RAW shooting to get the 48 megapixel, the full image off the phone. But the pixel binning, which they're doing, so you shoot the 48 megapixel, but you just get a 12 megapixel image after the fact. Like, those look better than ever, and it's really astonishing to me to go back even a few years. So like, the 10S or the 11, and you can really see the difference between then and now. And so if you're, coming from an older phone, camera is always a good reason to update. But I've been impressed with it so far.
Yeah, I did the trip. Went to Disneyland the other night. My daughter, my second daughter, went off to college, so now we are empty nesters officially. And we were just looking at each other like, oh man, what does this mean? And I said, well, why don't we just go have dinner at Disneyland? And she's like, yeah, let's do that. So we went. And but I had this new phone, and I started doing the stress test. You know how Austin Mann like goes into the wilderness, like where you need like really good boots and like a helicopter. I go to Disneyland to test my camera. But we went in, and the stress test for me is like a couple things. Like, you go into what they call dark rides, which are rides that have very little lighting, but they do have sometimes lit characters. It's like a stage, like riding through a stage. We went through the Little Mermaid ride, and I turned off the long exposure, and I went in and took some images, and they actually came out really good. There's a noticeable difference. Ultra wide camera, way better. I mean, I don't know how Apple comes up with the numbers that is 3 times better in low light, but it's better. Although I did get some vignetting. I'm going to do a post or a video or something with all these photos once I get a chance the next few days. But the vignetting showed up in ultra wide, but overall it looks really good. The three times lens looks worse to me because the other two look so much better, if that makes sense.
And we've got the return of the 2X where they crop on the sensor, and that looks really good. And I know a lot of people think this too, but 2X feels a bit more usable than 3X. So I was glad that that's come back on the Pros.
Yeah, and I was worried about that because what they're doing is, you've got a 48 megapixel sensor, which is bigger than the old 12 megapixel sensor. But when you're only taking the middle 12 megapixels, the actual sensor got smaller, I think, for a 12 megapixel only picture, So I was thinking, well, this isn't going to look any good. And it actually looks really good. And I'm sure there's a lot of stuff they're doing on the chip to make it look good. But the 2X looks better than I expected. And the biggest disappointment for me was activity mode, because I really want to shoot a lot of video, and I do a lot of video stuff with my phone. And I really like that idea of that stabilization. Well, I will say that I've always been very happy with the video stabilization on the iPhone out of the box. It's pretty good already. And this is supposed to be like next level. But because we were there in the evening, I could not get it to work. It just, there was not enough light for it. It needs to be out in sunlight, I think, to really work to its best. And then I went back and looked at all the videos Apple had on the website, and they were all during the day. And I was a little disappointed in activity mode not being really very good in the evening.
I was actually surprised by activity mode because I agree it kind of sucks in low light, but if I'm running around in a dark space, something terrible has happened and I probably shouldn't be filming it on my phone.
Okay.
Like I don't want to have to blare which project it, but whenever a phone says like it's amazing, it's stabilizing, I'm like, no, it's not. It's bad. It's not going to be like a gimbal. But I went on the L train, which is our Chicago's public transit, and famously they're very rickety and loud, and it's difficult to get video on the train because it shakes so much. But now I like just stuck my phone against the window and shot in activity mode, and it was phenomenal. It looked almost as good as a actually it looked better than some footage I had from a DJI gimbal for an iPhone, and that excites me because this mode isn't for professional filmmakers necessarily, or people who want to use a gimbal. I think it's for running around in the backyard with your pets, or just, filming your friends jostling around. I mean, I shot some footage in a bar, and it didn't look great. But I am really excited to take it out on a boat to see how that looks, because famously gimbals also are still really bad when it comes to water, just like the motors make it look weird. So I don't know, the more software implementation, like the apart from pixel binning, which I don't understand, but it still makes me excited. I'm glad that they're going with like this stabilization, because it feels like something people will use more than cinema mode, which is very cool, just kind of boring after a while. And I think that's going to get better every year. I am glad that they're leaning into this rather than more cinema stuff or even more portrait mode stuff.
But portrait mode is a good example. Like, it started out kind of like active mode is now. That was, you had to have just the right circumstances for it. But now it works almost everywhere. And granted, it's not going to match $1,000 piece of glass on $1,000 camera body, but it is going to look pretty good now. And I do have hope that activity mode or active mode, is it activity or active mode? No, I think it's active mode.
Active mode.
Yeah, active mode is going to get better with time. But I tested it at night. So, I mean, I kind of, made it harder for the system. But I even went into well-lit stores thinking, well, maybe I need to go into a store, and it was giving me the warning, and it just really didn't come out that good. I want to do another test with it during the daylight.
I think it's interesting that they give you the warning instead of shooting it and then it's bad. You find out later. Like, I'm glad that they interrupt you and say, hey, look, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get if you keep doing this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I want all those things. I want cinema mode. Or cinematic mode. I want active mode. I want the phone to become just really great at all that camera stuff. And every time we have this discussion, it's like, well, yeah, you could get a professional gimbal, or you could get a better portrait camera. But, the one in your pocket is your phone. And most people, very few people, less than 1% of the people are going to buy that stuff. So let's give everybody else something cool.
Have either of you tried the I don't, there isn't a way to activate it, right? But have you noticed the brighter screen outside? Because I have been loving that.
Yeah, agreed. It's great. Brighter is better.
If you were to play a lot of video games outside, like I do, maybe sort of, and it doesn't really run the battery down as much as I thought. Unlike maybe always on mode, which I'm still do they have a name for it? Always Retina or something? It's another name I can't remember.
I think it's just always on screen. Are you guys seeing? Because I've heard a couple people now say that they think the battery life is worse, and I haven't noticed it at all. Any terms of battery life loss with the always on screen. Anybody of you, have either of you seen that?
Mine seems pretty much on par with my previous phone. Now, just today, as we're recording this, Apple in a support document noted that the haptic keyboard may impact your battery life. I guess because it's hitting that Taptic engine just all the time.
Up.
But I don't know about the always on display.
I call shenanigans.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Taptic engine. Too much power. We made it too powerful. But I will say I did not anticipate the days it would take me to get used to the always on display. My phone's been set up now for 3 days, and I feel like I'm just now kind of getting rid of sort of the panic when I look over and see my phone screen. It's like, oh no, it didn't go to sleep. It's very strange.
I have the same thing. Yeah, it's really weird looking down and seeing your phone. I think the thing that gets you is that it's like because they also added your wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
So you look down and you see, well, wait, why is my phone on? Because we're so used to looking at your phone being on, thinking, oh no, I'm killing my battery. What's going on? And but I feel like this too shall pass. You'll get used to it. I already love the status board effect of it. Having it up and, seeing notifications. Like I've got a special one because I have a focus mode for podcasting. And right now it tells me the temperature in the room and the time in Memphis, So it's great. It just gives me the information I need.
I think it's interesting that they went the route that they did where you really do see the wallpaper. A lot of Android phones that have always on display, it's basically black, and then they light up where the time and whatever else they're showing you, the weather, that sort of thing. And Apple, I think, wanted to go further than that, and I do like it, and I pretty much have settled into it. I know some people have complained about the display being on when they're trying to go to bed. If you use a sleep focus mode, it will completely shut the screen off, and you don't have to tie that to like their bedtime reminder sleep tracking system. You can just have a focus mode for sleep that comes on at a set time. And so I was already using that. So that really hasn't been a big issue for me.
Yeah,
and
then
they also turn the screen off if you're using CarPlay, which is something they've done for a long time, where like there was this, I don't remember when it was, but some point in the past, there was a keynote slide like WWDC. And it's like, we have this really new UI for driving in the car. And it was an iPhone with a blank screen because they're talking about CarPlay. Like it's kind of funny, but also it's a good thing. The display should be off when it's connected to a car. It's off if it's in your pocket or if you put it face down on a table. So they're doing things to make it make sense. Where it's screen up. Someone may be looking at me. Leave it on all the time, but it definitely takes some getting used to it kind of always looking back at you.
I think I'm kind of being silly with the battery life stuff. I don't think it actually drains it too much. I understand why folks wouldn't like it, but I think the reason I do like it is because, like David, I have focus modes, so it does feel a little status sporty. I didn't even think of it like that, but I know that widgets are going to get better as the years go on. So while this is a first step, I'm still finding it pretty useful.
Yeah, I just want to learn to get more out of it, honestly. I'm still figuring it out, the changes to focus modes with iOS 16 plus this, as I expected. I like it, and I think it's cool. And I do think all of the people talking about the sky is falling over the fact that this thing is disturbing to them, I think if you just give it a few days, you'll get used to it.
And if you want to go back, you can. There is a toggle to turn off the always on display. I would like to see some more flexibility there. Like, would it be possible for the screen to go black except the widgets? Like, what if I don't want my wallpaper all the time, but I do want to see the other things? There's some more customization I think that could be done there, but overall, like, I'm just so surprised at how it changes how the iPhone feels. Because like when you touch it or you pick it up, the wallpaper kind of comes back to life, right? The color comes back in, the screen brightens a little bit, and it just makes it feel more organic in a way that I didn't really anticipate, but I think is really fun and playful. And those are words that people have used to describe the dynamic island. But I think it goes for the lock screen too, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're kind of they work together in that regard. And while we're on the topic, what do you think of the dynamic island now that you're using it?
I love the dynamic island. I think it is the most interesting thing Apple has done in years. And I haven't read a lot of reviews, but I think people have pointed out how like brilliant it is that they are hiding the previously what was the notch, like they're turning it into a feature. And I think that this UI could become I think it's going to inform how we use not just our phones, but whatever sort of heads up display could come in the future. Even if like an Apple headset never exists, the dynamic island is another way that Apple or iOS is unique. And I hope that the way that it the name is so silly, but like dynamic is the perfect way to describe it. It's just so lively. And I didn't notice this until yesterday, but when you are like, let's say I pop into Overcast and then I swipe up to go back to the home screen, I noticed that if like I my iPhone is also my most expensive fidget toy. So if I like would flip it to the side, it kind of like the page would, I don't know, kind of like go to the right and then get sucked up by the dynamic island. Mm-hmm. And it's just so cute. I love it.
Yeah. And also just like, it's a multitasking interface that snuck in at the same time. I mean, I am a big fan of timers. Like, we talked about time tracking earlier. Setting timers for me is a great way to kind of keep me on track. And putting it with the always on display up in the dynamic island with the timer, it's actually really nice. And it makes the phone way more useful to me when I'm not using it as a phone. So I feel like this is really nice. And just as to the name, I guess every time it comes up, it's like everybody just having a lot of fun making fun of the name, but whatever. I mean, it's this feature. Well, I'm going to continue to call it Dynamic Island because that's what they call it, but it's just a really great feature. And I got thinking like, this is something I'm going to get so used to that at some point they're going to figure out how to put the camera under the screen, and I'm going to miss this. Is this something that's just going to pop out of nowhere once they get a screen that doesn't need a notch? I don't know, but I am like 100% in.
I think the term island is going to become just part of how we describe certain parts of software in the future, or at least I hope. It could be another touch bar or, RIP 3D touch. Oh, I loved it. But like right now I'm just playing with the island, poking it and just having that feedback. Yeah, now I'm like, okay, yeah, this is definitely what kills my battery. But I can see Android take, I think it's fine when Android takes iOS features. iOS steals stuff from Android all the time. But just another interesting way we're able to see information in an unobtrusive way and able to control what information we see at any given time really excites me.
It's like pull to refresh. You use it once, you're like, okay,
yes,
this is the way it should
absolutely.
be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to see this everywhere on other platforms. And and speaking of other platforms, I want to see this on the iPad. Maybe it'll have to be the next version of the hardware. I mean, there's a rumored announcement next month, but I'd love to see what they could do with this idea on an iPad.
Really, really. Well, listen, if haptics ever came to the iPad, I think I would just sprint back to iPad OS because, boy, I love I mean, we haven't even talked about that, but the haptic keyboard, even on on the beta, was fabulous. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think Steven knows I get a little bit slap happy when it comes to possible virtual displays, but I don't know. It seems like this is something that we're going to get used to really quickly, and we're just Apple's really kind of pushing the haptics on us, and I'm so excited. I have no interesting words to describe it other than excitement.
And just for people who are listening and not aware, with the new version of iOS 16, you can turn on a switch that gives you a haptic feedback when you tap on the keyboard, And this is something that has been on Android for a while, but it hasn't been on the iPhone. And like you, I turned it on in beta and never turned it off. I love it. I like the feeling of tapping on the keyboard and getting a physical, tactile response. My only question is why this isn't on by default. Maybe it's the battery thing that we just got word of.
Possibly. That's really
I would
funny.
recommend, if you haven't tried it, I'd recommend it. Now, I forget how I did it now. Is it under keyboards or it's under settings somewhere? But if somebody's listening, where do they go?
Yeah, maybe sound and haptics. But it is interesting. I mean, and Alex, I think you're right. Like, I could see a world in which we do have this theoretical Apple AR, VR, whatever. Like, maybe this island is sort of the home base for that, right? And it's kind of contains all of your things and they come and go as they're needed. It really is interesting. It would be a shame if all this work went into it and it didn't show up somewhere else. The iPad never had a notch because it has bezels still thick enough, which you need on the iPad, right? Because you got your thumb has to go somewhere to hide that stuff, right? So they never need to contend with the notch. But I could see something like this coming to the iPad. Maybe it's not even, in the center. Maybe it's up in a corner somewhere. I don't know, but I do think that there's a lot of work that went into this, and it does make me wonder about what the future of it is. And surely it's not just something that we're going to have for a few years until they can get rid of the cutout completely and they go to an all display phone. Like, this feels like they're building towards something bigger than just, oh, we wanted to change the notch, and so we added some software around it to make it fancy.
What about on the Mac? We do have a notch on the Mac. Could you see something like this being on a future version of Mac OS?
Yeah, that I have a little bit more trouble kind of understanding what it would be adding, because you have the dock and we have the menu bar already. So I don't know what that would bring to the Mac experience that isn't viable in another way, but who knows?
I mean, with Notification Center, on Mac OS, I think they're still just trying to figure all of that out. And I'm still using very Macy Mac apps for my notifications and stuff, and I rarely open Control Center. That is what it's called, right? My gosh. You can tell that I have not done consulting in a couple months because I'm like, what should I call these things? But I don't know. As the Mac gets more iOS and iPad OS features, it also makes me hopeful for maybe more physical controls on the Mac. I mean, they tried with the touch bar, but this could be another thing that I am imagining, but I have the the inaccessibility features on the iPhone. You've got you can either do the double tap or triple tap to run a shortcut, and I have that to just pull up a draft so I can just quickly take a note, and it feels more responsive on the iPhone 14 Pro. That could be wishful thinking, but I'm going to choose to believe that they made the motor better, or that I dropped my previous phone too many times and having one that's fresh is just making it work more. Who's to say?
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by ZocDoc. Go to ZocDoc.com/MPU and find the right doctor right now with ZocDoc. You can sign up for free. ZocDoc makes it easy to find quality doctors in your network and in your neighborhood. Plus, with real, verified patient reviews, you can find the right doctor for you. ZocDoc is a free app that shows you doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them. You can find every specialist under the sun with ZocDoc, whether you're trying to straighten those teeth, fix an achy back, or get that mole checked out, or anything else. ZocDoc has you covered. The mobile app is as easy as ordering a ride to a restaurant or getting delivery to your house. Search, find, and book doctors with just a few taps. With ZocDoc, you can find and review local doctors, read verified patient reviews from real people who made real appointments. Now, when you walk into that doctor's office, you're all set to see someone from in your network who gets you. So find the doctor that's right for you and book an appointment in person or remotely, and that works on your schedule. Every month, millions of people use ZocDoc. It's their go-to whenever they need to find and book a quality doctor. I have dealt with that problem where the insurance company gives you a book full of people that are supposed to be in the plan, and then you call and they're not in the plan, and you spend hours trying to find a doctor. I threw that book in the trash because ZocDoc is now the way I handle this. Using ZocDoc, we were able to find doctors that were not only in our plan, but right for us. We're very happy with it. You should definitely check it out. So go to ZocDoc.com/MPU and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/MPU. That URL one more time, ZocDoc.com/MPU. And our thanks to ZocDoc for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
Alex, we like to close these interview shows out with some favorites, some apps and services that you're using that maybe we haven't gotten to in the show so far. So what you got?
My current obsession is a blogging platform slash engine. I don't even really know what you would call it. But it is blot.im. It is a way to publish your blog via either Dropbox, which is what I use, GitHub, or Google Drive. And the way that you push out a post is literally, I literally will drop a markdown file into a folder and bam, there is a blog post. And you can do a lot of fancy things with, if you want to, use any sort of basically it works with anything. I know a lot of people use VS Code. I've been after I just figured out you can just drag and drop. I have switched to Ulysses, but it also, you can push like everything you want to publish into a draft mode that looks exactly the same. So all of the metadata is already there. You don't the CMS is Dropbox, which, I mean, I'm still using Dropbox despite all of the weirdness over the years. And it also, because it just uses the file system, it works great with shortcuts. So my friend Jeff Perry built me a shortcut to put in images, because that was kind of just tripping me up because Ulysses doesn't really handle images. And I'm just playing with it more and more. And you can also get a bunch of YAML files in there, which I don't fully yet understand, but love. It is just such a simple way to get stuff up on the internet. It is $5 a month and like $20 a year, which is fantastic. And I don't know. I'm falling in love with blogging again, just in general, as more and more of my favorite publishing platforms end up being controlled by algorithms. I just keep sliding back into getting things via RSS. Because it's just I have the same file of the XML file, I think, from Google Reader from years and years and years ago, and I just end up bringing that into various RSS readers, and Blot works so well with RSS too, and you can choose to do like the old school thing where you only show part of the blog, or you can do the whole part of the post, or you can do the whole thing. It's fantastic. I'm also using a Safari extension called Tabitha, which is a way to get all of your tabs via Markdown links. And the reason that Tabitha is different, though, is you can literally do all of your tabs. So when I am doing a podcast, I typically am, opening up a bunch of tabs for show notes, but instead of getting each individual, I do have a shortcut to just get the Markdown link, but you can just choose to get all of the tabs via Markdown, and it makes a pretty list, and it has saved me a bunch of time. I've noticed that my time tracking for making show notes has gone down since I started using Tabitha.
Yeah, so let me just say, I had never heard of this, and we saw it before we started recording, and I have already installed it. I am sold. What a great idea.
Yeah.
So if you work on the internet and you need to get a list of web pages, you need to try this. It's $3.
Yeah, it's one of those things that has already paid for. It's already like, my time is my most precious resource. This is not a new thought for your listeners, but I think it's already paid for itself. And the last product is not I would say it's a service, maybe not an app, but it is the MagSafe pop socket adapter. And I guess I'll talk about that more in More Power Users when we discuss iPhone cases. But if you are living the MagSafe lifestyle like I do, but you also have a weird hand shape that makes using a phone difficult unless you have a pop socket, it is the way to go, because it's very easy to pull it off, but it also I have not had any issues with this pop socket falling off. And I used to sort of roll my own pop socket and just put a pop socket on a ground magnet, which was not a good idea. A couple screens got shattered in the process, but the official MagSafe pop socket is awesome.
Well, those are good picks, and man, Tabitha is great. Where are you blogging? I didn't know you were blogging. Again, where should people go to read what you're doing with Blot?
People should go to patreon.com/Alex Cox.
Okay, that's where it is.
I will send you where I'll send you guys where I am blogging. But listen to by Friday, and my anxieties around blogging, but I love it, and I'm getting back into writing. Oh, Grammarly. That is my real third software pick. Grammarly has been a lot of fun to use lately.
Yeah, I'm a fan too. Stephen, you use Grammarly as well, right?
I do. So I have it in Safari as an extension. I have it in Chrome as well. Kind of bounce between the two browsers right now. I don't have the native Mac app enabled where it's shows up in every text field on Mac OS. But anytime I write an article, I'll paste it into Grammarly and do a pass and make sure that everything's good. I don't always do what it suggests. Grammarly kind of has a point of view sometimes I don't like.
Absolutely.
It loves commas. It loves commas.
Man. It does, but it's amazing for capturing errors in, especially in syntax. If you have a complex sentence and you've accidentally, misplaced something, it'll be like, hey, what about this or that? So it is an awesome tool for anyone who writes on the web.
Yeah, I agree. I don't use the app either. I find the app is slow too. It's much faster just to use it in a browser. But yeah, it's a good one. Well, Alex, I'm so glad that you were able to come back and share with us today and all the cool stuff you're up to. And I feel like you're going to have great success with your new indie life as you start to sort things out. You always make me laugh, Alex, because you're like, well, I'm not figuring things out. But then you proceed to explain how you've written shortcuts to solve the tiniest of problems and you're tracking time. And I'm on to you, Alex Cox. I'm on to you. So, gang, if you want to go see more of the stuff Alex is doing, we're going to put all the stuff in the show notes. But Do By Friday with Merlin Mann, one of my favorite people on the internet, and just a great podcast. Roboism on Relay FM, Two-Headed Girl at transistor.fm, and the Patreon, which we were just talking about. You can go check that out too. Anywhere else people should go, Alex?
stjude.com/relay, I believe, is
you're the best.
URL. Yeah.
You're the best.
No, you both are the best and have been a huge inspiration for me as I, spent slowly going indie, and I have had such amazing role models in the two of you. And thank you so much again for having me on.
I remember you and I sitting together. I think it was like the podcast conference in Seattle. We were somewhere together, and you started talking about going on your own, and I could see it in your eye. It was just a question of time. So,
yep.
you were there. All right. Thanks again to our sponsors, 1Password, Text Expander, Indeed, and ZocDoc. We'll see you next time.